I'm a 19-year-old guy, and recently, I had to make one of the hardest decisions in my life. Ending things with my 20-year-old girlfriend after discovering she manipulated me into considering an open relationship, only to cover up her cheating. We'd been together for nearly 3 years, and during that time, I genuinely believed we were solid. We'd had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we shared countless sweet moments and all the usual things you'd expect in a serious, committed relationship. From the start, we were very clear about what we wanted, and both agreed to keep things exclusive. Neither of us had any interest in an open relationship. While I understand open relationships and polyamory work for some people, I've always known it's not for me. But over the past few months, something began to feel off. She started making comments about other guys, saying things like how attractive some random guy was or how she found a particular guy sexy. At first, I just shrugged it off, figuring it was harmless and that she was just being open with me. But then these comments became more frequent, and they started to make me feel uncomfortable. It's one thing to notice people and even mention it once in a while, but her talking about other guys more and more didn't sit well with me. I was starting to feel overwhelmed, as if my presence wasn't enough for her anymore. Then, one day, she hit me with a bombshell. She admitted that she was starting to feel interested in other people. She told me that while she still loved me, she wanted to explore things with other people on a personal and sensual level. After sharing this, she suggested opening up our relationship to allow her to do this while still being together. I was absolutely stunned, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. At first, I nervously laughed, thinking she might be joking, but it quickly became clear she was serious. I half joked and said something like, "Well, I'm not going to be part of it," hoping she'd get the hint and drop the topic. Unfortunately, she didn't. She kept pushing the idea, and I started getting frustrated. I finally asked her directly why she wanted this so badly. She said she was curious and wanted to explore her sensuality without damaging our emotional bond. Her words caught me off guard, and I didn't know how to respond right away. When I finally gathered my thoughts, I told her, "I understand your need to explore, but if that's what you want, it can't be with me. You know, exclusivity is a non-negotiable for me in a serious relationship." This led to a heated argument, during which she accused me of being close-minded and called me a coward for not wanting to try something new. Her words hurt. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt torn. Part of me wondered if I should try to find a middle ground or talk it out, but deep down, I knew my stance on this issue wouldn't change. After thinking it over, I decided I had to stand my ground. We met up again a few days later to talk, and I calmly explained to her that I couldn't accept an open relationship, even if it meant I could see other people too. I told her, "I'm sorry, but we just don't agree on this. I'm glad you want to explore, but I'm not the person to do it with. Let's end things here before we cause each other more pain." I suggested we go our separate ways so she could have the freedom she wanted without me having to deal with the constant anxiety of knowing she was with someone else. She didn't take it well. She accused me again of being selfish and insecure, but at that point, I just stayed quiet and let her say whatever she needed to say. After a few moments, both of us with tears in our eyes, we said our goodbyes. Later that night, I saw that she had blocked me on everything. I sighed, laid down on my bed, and tried to let the reality of it sink in. The next few days were hard, but I focused on myself and did my best to move forward, maintaining zero contact with her. Then, a few days later, I unexpectedly ran into her. She asked to talk, and even though a part of me knew it might be a mistake, I still agreed. I was curious and wanted some closure. especially since I had lingering questions about why she suddenly wanted an open relationship after years of commitment. We went back to her place, and as we sat down, she tried to make small talk, asking how I was doing. I dodged her question and got straight to the point, asking her why she had suddenly brought up polyamory after all this time, even after she had once insisted on exclusivity herself. At first, she hesitated, but eventually she admitted the truth. She told me that, yes, she had been emotionally cheating on me and had even felt tempted to cross physical boundaries. I was shocked, but I kept my composure and asked her to explain. She confessed that she'd been seeing a guy she met at college for the past 2 months. She claimed it hadn't gotten physical until the night we broke up, but I couldn't help feeling deeply betrayed. I asked her why she hadn't just told me the truth from the start. Did she think I wouldn't figure it out? She sighed and said she hadn't wanted to lose me, that she loved me, and that her friends had encouraged her to try an open relationship so she could still explore while keeping me around. That was a hard blow to take. I asked her who had been giving her this advice, and she admitted it was a mix of friends, some of whom were even in open relationships themselves, sometimes without their partner's knowledge. I felt disgusted, both with her and with the people she was listening to. It took everything in me not to explode. I asked her if she was still in touch with this guy, and she admitted that she was. She then told me that the same day we broke up, she had slept with him, but she regretted it and realized she'd made a mistake. In that moment, I couldn't look at her the same way. I felt like the last bit of respect I'd held on to for her was gone. I took a deep breath, fighting back the pain in my chest, and told her I couldn't give her another chance. I told her that I had made it clear from the beginning that exclusivity was essential to me, and she had gone behind my back and tried to manipulate me. I told her that if she ever saw me around, she should avoid me because I didn't want to see or hear from her again. She broke down crying and begged me to forgive her, grabbing onto my shirt to stop me from leaving. I pushed her hands away, opened the door, and left. When I got home, I let myself cry, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. It was hard, but I kept telling myself I'd done the right thing. She had made her choice, and even though it hurt, I had to accept it. In the days that followed, I tried to process everything. I was still deeply hurt, but I knew I needed to move on. People told me it was okay for her to want to explore, but it didn't mean I had to change my values for her. We were just incompatible, and while I wish things hadn't ended this way, I know I can't go back. So here I am, trying to pick up the pieces and move forward. The pain is still fresh, but I know that with time, I'll be able to move on and find someone who values the same things I do. I thought I had a decent girlfriend, but now I realize it's better to end things than to compromise my own happiness. Relationships are complex, especially when trust and expectations are tested by events that reveal who our partners truly are or what they truly value. Sometimes, these moments are painful, exposing the depth of denial or disappointment we may have ignored. These stories bring to light how we navigate betrayal, shifting relationship dynamics, and the vulnerability that comes with discovering hidden truths. In the first story, a man finds himself heartbroken and blindsided by his partner's sudden decision to ask for an open relationship. What hurt even more was the underlying truth that her request wasn't out of a genuine shift towards polyamory, but rather a hidden desire to be with someone else without ending their relationship. This emotional journey began when the man started noticing subtle changes in his girlfriend's behavior and communication, a shift that many in his life noticed, but he tried to ignore. Friends warned him, and there were small signs that her commitment had started to wane, but he clung to the belief that she was still the same person who valued monogamy. Ultimately, he felt betrayed not just by her actions, but by his own ability to trust his instincts. When he confronted her, she reluctantly admitted that her desire for an open relationship was a cover to explore a connection with someone else. This revelation was devastating. He realized she wasn't interested in open love or polyamory as a way of growing their bond, but rather as an excuse to avoid accountability for her behavior. This distinction mattered deeply to him, and he knew then that he couldn't stay with someone who was willing to compromise his trust in such a way. As he shared his story online, some comments seemed to defend her, suggesting that perhaps his disappointment stemmed from a lack of flexibility or understanding. However, the overwhelming majority affirmed his feelings, agreeing that the issue wasn't polyamory itself, but rather her attempt to frame infidelity as a new approach to relationships. Polyamory, as many experienced voices explained, requires open communication and mutual consent, not hidden motives or deceit. In a polyamorous relationship, transparency is vital, with both parties committed to shared values and boundaries. What his girlfriend did, however, was the opposite. Her actions had blurred the line between what they'd agreed upon and her hidden agenda, making her behavior undeniably an act of emotional betrayal. One commenter noted that what hurt most in such situations is when someone hides behind labels or alternative relationship structures to mask a desire that could otherwise be destructive. As painful as this experience was, it left the man with a powerful lesson on boundaries, trust, and self-respect. He realized that even though he could heal and move forward, he'd need time to restore his faith in relationships and find someone who genuinely valued the same ideals. The story underscores that betrayal can come wrapped in the guise of new ideas or exciting possibilities, but if the foundation of trust is absent, these alternatives can become mere excuses for selfish behavior. In the second story, a woman discovers her fiancé, Mark, had invited his former situationship, Tracy, to their wedding without consulting her. Her initial reaction was confusion. She didn't see Tracy as a threat, but the secrecy and intention behind the invitation felt like a breach of trust. Mark had once shared with her how meaningful his connection with Tracy had been, though they never formally dated. He spoke fondly of their time together, holding on to love letters and gifts she'd given him. At first, the woman dismissed her insecurities as irrational, but the invitation incident cast a shadow over her excitement for the wedding. It felt like he hadn't fully moved on from Tracy, and this planted a seed of doubt. Eventually, she confronted Mark's best friend, Tom, hoping he could provide some clarity. Tom revealed that Mark and Tracy's connection had been much deeper than she'd realized. They were close friends who had almost transitioned into a romantic relationship, but ultimately decided to separate due to differing religious values. For Mark, Tracy represented a time of innocence and purity, values he now seemed to project onto his memories of her, almost idealizing her as the perfect woman. This conversation with Tom was heartbreaking for her. She felt like she'd been unknowingly competing with a ghost from Mark's past. When she finally confronted Mark, his response confirmed her worst fears. He admitted to feeling that his love for Tracy had been pure and untainted, a kind of connection he believed he'd never find again. While he insisted that he loved his fiancée, he described it as a different kind of love, one that seemed, to her, second to the one he still held for Tracy. Her heartbreak grew when Mark revealed he'd wanted Tracy at the wedding to make her see what she'd lost, despite his supposed commitment to his current relationship. It was clear he hadn't let go of his feelings for Tracy, and worse, he seemed to be using his fiancée as a pawn in his unresolved emotions. This revelation tore her apart. She felt like she was living in the shadow of his past love, and that their future was now tainted by a painful and lingering attachment. As their conversation continued, an unsettling detail surfaced. Mark casually mentioned Tracy's pregnancy, a fact he shouldn't have known, given that Tracy had blocked him on all social media platforms. Her intuition kicked in, and she demanded to see his phone, uncovering that he had created multiple social media accounts to secretly keep tabs on Tracy's life. The discovery left her feeling disgusted and betrayed on a level she hadn't anticipated. Her fiance's obsessive behavior was not only creepy, but crossed boundaries that she couldn't ignore. It became clear to her that Mark was still deeply entangled in Tracy's life, despite his insistence that he'd moved on. Calling off the wedding was one of the hardest decisions she had to make, but she knew she deserved someone who could love her without reservation. After the breakup, Tracy reached out to her, and they decided to meet over coffee. The two women, who had once been part of the same love triangle without ever knowing it, found a strange sense of solidarity in their shared experiences. Over coffee, she finally understood why Mark had been so fixated on Tracy. Tracy was kind, intelligent, and radiated an inner strength that anyone could see. They realized that Mark had idealized her to an extent that overshadowed any chance for a real, healthy connection with someone new. Their conversation was eye-opening. Tracy expressed sympathy and shared how uncomfortable it had been to realize that Mark still harbored such intense feelings for her, especially after she'd moved on. The meeting was cathartic for both women, and they found comfort in knowing they were not alone in dealing with the emotional fallout of Mark's behavior. This mutual understanding helped them both move forward, each knowing they deserved partners who could meet them with the same level of commitment they were willing to offer. These stories shed light on the importance of honesty, self-awareness, and healthy boundaries in relationships. They remind us that while everyone has a past, it's our responsibility to leave old attachments behind if we're committed to building a future with someone new. In the end, both individuals in these stories had to make painful decisions to protect their self-worth and emotional health, realizing that love should be rooted in respect and trust, free from the shadows of past relationships or selfish desires. Tracy is one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. She looked great in pictures, but in person, she was even better. When we met, she greeted me and asked if I could come to her house since she gets tired being outside too long. We grabbed some coffee to go, though it was a bit awkward. Once we were at her place, Tracy started by apologizing, saying she felt like she was the reason I'm single now. I told her it wasn't her fault. She also mentioned that she got the invitation to our wedding, but didn't want to come because she was already in a happy relationship and didn't see the point in reconnecting with someone from the past. I got curious and asked why she stayed friends with Mark, since she once said she wanted to be with him after their breakup, which seemed the opposite of how she was acting. Tracy seemed uncomfortable, but explained that at first, she was really in love with Mark. He was her first love. She described him as someone she could trust and who treated her to gifts and trips. But over time, she started feeling pressured, as he kept pushing her for intimacy. She didn't feel ready, and even pretended to be sick sometimes to avoid it, feeling something in her gut telling her to say no. Tracy explained that she eventually used her parents' strict beliefs to justify her boundaries. This caused a fight that led to their breakup. However, they stayed in touch because she felt she owed him for helping her get a job at a well-known company and spending so much on her. One of his gifts was even a Rolex for her 18th birthday, which made me feel a bit annoyed since he had never spent that much on me. When Tracy found out that Mark and I were seeing each other, she was relieved. Finally, she felt she had a reason to cut him off completely, as he would still bring up being intimate with her sometimes. In the end, I shared with her that Mark would sometimes talk about her during our relationship. It was a bit weird at first, but I brushed it off, assuming she was just part of his past. I also told her about Mark's multiple social media accounts with fake female profiles. At first, she didn't believe me, but I showed her the profiles I knew about, which were all creepy and looked real. Tracy decided to make her account private after seeing this and even created a new account with her Korean name, deactivating her old one. We had a great time together and became friends. She's a genuinely sweet person, and I saw how well her boyfriend treated her. I'm happy she found love and moved on from Mark. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy our videos, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Have a wonderful day.